Hi folks. For some time people have been asking me to do a video on the low register, particularly the extreme low register for bass trombone. And I'm going to try to talk about principles which I hope are applicable not just to bass trombone and trombone, but to other brass instruments as well. So the first principle is that I keep in mind whenever dealing about embouchure is to do as much as you need and as little as you can. Now those two things are really, really important. In terms of doing as much as you need, sometimes people get stuck in a rut and they say, I don't want to have any changes whatsoever. Everything needs to look exactly the same, which is not necessarily the case. We'll get into that in a little bit. The second thing is, but as little as you can. Sometimes people do really more than they need to, and excess of what they need to. And what you can wind up with is an embouchure that's inefficient. You have a lot of challenges getting from one position to the other. Now, second basic principle is that as we go higher, our apertures that I've talked about in other videos, the apertures get smaller. And as we go lower, apertures get larger. Now, the interesting thing is our lip position changes based on where we are in our register, and that's normal. So for example, if I go to play an F above the staff, you notice my bottom lip is slightly behind my top lip. Yet when I go to that F 2 octaves below, see how my bottom lip comes out from behind the top lip, and it turns out. That's to allow the aperture to expand. Now, there are different ways of looking at it. That's certainly the way I look at it. So what happens is that continues as we go into the low register. And if we take that F and we work down to pedal B flat, you'll find your bottom lip turns further and further out. Here's pedal B flat, A flat. Now, do you spot the issue? The potential complication. And if you don't, I'll explain it to you. This mouthpiece is finite. There's a finite amount of space inside this mouthpiece. So if the way we keep going lower is by expanding further and further into it, well then there's going to come a point that our bottom lip is going to prevent our top lip from vibrating, or our lips are going to be prevented from vibrating against each other to make the sound wave happen. And so that's what happens when you see, if I continue on that chromatic scale, G, I can barely get a sound out on a pedal D. And it's because I'm simply running out of space. My lips going into the mouthpiece runs out of space. So what do? Well, I make an adjustment so that rather than my bottom lip turning into the mouthpiece, it actually flattens up against my teeth here. So I go from this position to this position. And that works its way down so my pedal G looks like this. All the way down the register. Now, so that's the big thing is actually allowing myself to make a change. Because if I didn't allow myself to make a change, I could spend years and years and years trying to work with putting the lips into the mouthpiece. And yet nothing that I do, there's no amount of practice which I can put into it, which is going to make them vibrate any better if the space that they're in is getting smaller. It might get marginally improved. Now, my lips also tend to be fairly thick. Many of you have thicker lips, some of you have thinner lips. In my experience, teaching people, those with thinner lips have to do less of this. And sometimes people can work out without changing at all whatsoever. That's a very, very small percentage of the population. I would venture less than 5%, and I'd actually venture probably less than 3%, which leaves 95 to 97% of us to do something different. Now, that's basically how you make the low register work. In the words of Duke Ellington, if it sounds good, it is good. And if your low register sounds great, even if you think you're doing something unconventional or weird, chances are you're doing what's right for your body. Now, last little bit as far as what I do. The shift that I have will also not only flatten my bottom lip, but have me move the mouthpiece up my face a little bit. You see how my mouthpiece gets closer to my nose? From here. Now, the other shift, which I've seen people do, it's minority of the population, but it does work for some people, is they actually continue that moving down with the mouthpiece, lower and lower and lower. That doesn't work for me. When I encounter someone that does that, I encourage them to keep working on it. I can't offer them specifics, but that's extreme pedal register in a nutshell.